Now, back in the United States, the Democratic caucuses are continuing with the Texas, Utah, Nevada, and Arizona primaries coming up next. But so far, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg is taking the lead over Bernie Sanders. Well, joining us now to explore Buttigieg's policies, we have the founder and president of the Jerusalem Washington Center, Gideon Israel. All right, so we're first going to start with Israel. Where does Buttigieg stand when it comes to Israel?
Pete Buttigieg, if you ever see a speech of his or an interview, there's always a very thoughtful answer. He always goes into depth into things, into thoughtful ideas. Now, in Israel, he says a lot of things that sort of cover both sides. So, for example, Israel is our most important ally, but on the other hand, we need to speak truth to the ally. We can be supportive of Israel, but we don't have to be supportive of a right-wing government. What about right of return in a peace agreement? We can honor that in the frame of an agreement. What does that mean? Unclear. If Israel annexes the territory, well, the United States isn't going to foot the bill. So will you commit to, not giving aid if they do that? Well, I'm not going to answer that right now, and we'll see what happens when I'm president.
It's very, very non-committal.
It's very, very
diplomatic.
So, for example, would you, have put the embassy back in Tel Aviv? Well, no, but so it was a good idea to move to Jerusalem? Well, not really. So there's a lot of things. It kind of reminds me a little bit of President Obama, who sort of with the rhetoric expressed his strong support for Israel, but on the other hand talked about the need to talk truth to this ally. Now, talking truth to an ally and talking truth to someone can have, it's a very broad range of what exactly, will happen. And he said that should Israel apply its sovereignty to Judea and Samaria, the United States government will let them know that they're not happy with that. So what does that mean? Okay. It's a little bit unclear.
Well, so how does his policies, as clear as they may be, how do they differ from the other candidates in the Democratic Party?
Sanders, Warren.
Exactly.
So Buttigieg defines himself as a progressive, and he does talk in the language of progressive, of the justice movement, housing justice and race and racial justice and systemic racism. So, for example, on the issue of health care, so while Bernie would have total government-controlled health care, so Buttigieg says, well, we'll have a public option, but whoever wants to stay on their plan can stay on their plan. In general, he doesn't go into many specifics of policies. I mean, while there are proposals on his website, when he talks, he focuses a lot on inclusion, and we want to include everybody, and we don't want to reject everybody, and he talks about leadership, and he talks about values, but he doesn't necessarily talk about what he's going to do.
Right, not specific policy, but what about foreign policy? Where does he stand in terms of foreign policy?
So interesting. So when he was at the J Street conference, and that was about the Middle East and foreign policy in general, he talked about U.S. leadership, and sort of every question went back to, this administration has, relinquished U.S. leadership and has relinquished promoting U.S. values, and we have to live our values, we have to live our values here so we can promote them abroad. So it's...
But again, the question is, what are those values that he is specifically talking about? Because to say, I have American values and I want to apply them elsewhere, which American values is he talking about?
Well,
does he ever get into those?
I just want to ask you, do you think that this guy has a standing chance against Donald Trump? I mean, he's the mayor in Indiana, right? This is not a guy with the most political experience.
No.
Trump didn't have much political experience himself, but was obviously a much bigger name in the United States.
So I think when you look at the general election, it's important to understand that we're talking about a few million people, meaning I believe you could put up, Mickey Mouse, you could put up a straw man, and that person would already get 42 to 44% of the vote from the Democrat and Democrat lean side. So I think we're talking about, what about those few million voters across about 10 to 15 swing states? I think that anybody who goes up against Trump has a problem, because Trump doesn't come and say, I'm a good person, I'm this great person, therefore when you find dirt on him, suddenly that's a big surprise. Donald Trump kind of drags his opponents into that dirt, and Donald Trump doesn't get dirty because everything's already been thrown at them. But then the politicians who try to portray themselves as upstanding good people, then people already say, whoa, we didn't know that about you, all these things surfacing about Michael Bloomberg, for example.
Sure. I think it's fair to say that the media has a lot to do with that struggle as a whole. But all right, I mean, I think you gave us a pretty good rundown about who this guy is, who Pete Buttigieg is. The question is whether or not he's going to be the man who is going up against Trump. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.